It's just a few days until the much anticipated national dialogue, the national convention part of it, but already there are cracks. Several major legacy foundations, among them the Thabo Mbeki, Desmond and Leah Tutu and FW de Klerk Foundations, have pulled out of the Preparatory Task Team. They say government has taken control of what was meant to be a citizen-led process, that it's been rushed and that the basic groundwork just isn't there. This follows the DA's own announcement that it won't be part of the process, which was made earlier last month. Now, you'll remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa launched the national dialogue as a way to bring South Africans together to build a shared vision for the next 30 years. The first convention, as we've told you, runs from the 15th to the 17th of August at UNISA in Pretoria. The question is, though, will it deliver the substance that South Africans want, or will it end up being more symbolism than real solutions? Let's speak to Christo van der Rheede from the FW de Klerk Foundation, Tebogo Khaas from Public Interest South Africa, and Yoliswa Makhasi from the New South Institute. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. Let me start with you, Christo, because you are part of the legacy foundations that issued a statement out on Friday withdrawing your participation. Your statement says this is because the core principles meant to underpin the whole national dialogue have been violated in the rush to host a gathering on the 15th of August. Expand a bit more on that. We thought you were part of the Preparatory Task Team. You were meant to safeguard and curate and shepherd this process and guide it such that it fulfills its original mandate. So when we see you pulling out, it leaves us with a lot of questions.
Thank you, and thank you to all of your viewers as well, and to my fellow guests. I think it's important to give a little bit of context to what has happened. The legacy foundations, together with a whole host of other role players, came together last year during the first phase to conceptualize the national dialogue process, including the national convention, and to discuss core principles. One of the key principles that was sort of non-compromisable to us was the fact that we would want this entire national dialogue process to be a bottom-up process. In other words, we want it to be community-led, etc. A preparatory task team then was established, and we started last year in earnest to create various subcommittees and to focus on preparing for the national convention as well as the national dialogue process. The second phase entailed engaging with the presidency on one, funding to ensure that we have funding available to pay for logistical arrangements, etc., a communication strategy, also for any place where we have to manage or put up this event, etc. And our view was always that it shouldn't cost the state an arm and a leg, because really it shouldn't cost the state any money. But yes, you will need some funding to drive specific or to cover for certain expenses. Unfortunately, what we've discovered during our discussions with, and especially during the second with the presidency, that there was no budget, or the money was only deposited last week with NetRag, and that the arrangements was actually in disarray. And we said, but we cannot have a national convention next week in the absence of a proper budget, in the absence of proper planning, etc. Let's postpone it. Unfortunately, we got word from the presidency that the president is not prepared to postpone it. And we fear that the national convention will really not lay a solid foundation for the national dialogue process to happen.
Christo, if I stick with you for a moment, how significant was this aspect of the budget? Because South Africans have been debating for months now the figure of 700 million rand, which was credited to the foundations, the legacy foundations. But we read in reporting that the intention on government's side is to cap it far much lower than that, somewhere in the region of 450 million rand or thereabouts. That gap and that gulf, is that part of where there's a bit of discord between yourself and government?
No, not at all. I want to assure the public out there that there were various budgets that were presented. The initial budget was in the region of 23 million. Then there was other budgets prepared, and eventually a very big budget that came onto the table of 700 million. It was my personal opinion that we can never justify that amount. And in my engagement with my fellow colleagues, I said, let us first wait for government, let us engage, so that at the end of the day we have this national dialogue process funded with minimum amount and with private sector funding as well.
Yeah.
But that also brings about a lot of risk. But the issue of budget is not the core reason why the foundations stopped our involvement in the National Convention. It has everything to do with proper planning, with the logistics issues that are not resolved at this point in time, and the fact that we haven't communicated with the public about what is the purpose of the national dialogue.
Yeah.
I've went on the government's communication website, and should have by now have prepared a toolkit so that you have your facilitators empowered, and so the community understand how to go about to have constructive and
a question to you, Yoliswa, and then to you, Tebogo, as well. Same question. Where in your reading, Yoliswa, if I start with you, in your reading, where does this, the latest developments, where do they leave this process of the national dialogue? The National Convention is the first of many steps. I mean, I was reading earlier on that what's planned is something in the region of 13,664 community and sectoral dialogues. If we can't do the first one, being the National Convention right, where does that leave us?
Well, I mean, I think that firstly, from our side as the New South Institute, we support the idea of a dialogue, and President has indicated that it should be a participatory and inclusive process. So if you have other people not happy about aspects of it, like the foundations who are reportedly having walked out or withdrawn from the convention process specifically, I think that there is a need for more effort to bring all stakeholders together, and also just to ensure that we are true to this idea of co-creating, co-producing, and collaborating in resolving challenges of South Africa. So government, as much as government plays the role of being a breadwinner because they are going to be paying the cost for the convention and the dialogue in general, I think it's important that there's a balance between that role of being the breadwinner who's paying for things, and also being able to be flexible and accommodate and listen to the views from the other parties, because all parties are equally important in this process.
I'll pick up on that. That's not lost on me at all, Yoliswa. The whole idea of a breadwinner, and also marrying that with what the whole purpose of an inclusive dialogue is. But before I do that, I want to go to Tebogo. Tebogo, same question that I asked of Yoliswa. Where does this leave us, the recent developments around the national dialogue?
There's a higher risk that whatever outcomes emerge from the dialogue, if they're not seen to be very inclusive, or indeed, as they claim, that they will reach out to the grassroots, they are not just going to be seen as a vanity project, just a mere conversation about how best to paint over cracks. And we know that there's lots of cracks in this building that we call our democratic project. And to the extent that there are already glaring omissions and exclusions of grassroots and youth within the planning, the planning itself, and there's very little information available. It seeks to touch on the issue of transparency. How transparent do they wish to be? Or are we going to have a similar arrangement as it was with CODESA? And we know that decades later, leaders at the time of CODESA now are being seen as people who really, rightly or wrongly, and I don't agree with some of the criticism, you would find that there are things that could have been done better. And I think we should learn from the past, and it doesn't seem to be the case here. And especially if you look at the fact that the clearing of missions in critical sectors such as the security cluster and small business, economics, and international relations are going to be key. But more importantly, it seems to be a meeting together or a putting together of people who are more agreeable than disagreeable. Yet every day we see protests, every day we see issues coming up. And I want to locate it to what we are living through, or going through. Just in the past 2 days, we've had three police people killed. In the last instance, the police was killed by somebody who's reportedly or allegedly an undocumented foreigner. It means that there are issues that needs to be part of the dialogue to make sure we don't get to be seeing this type of instances happen where people, immigration becomes an issue and we don't see it play central, or we don't see how the protagonists, especially those who don't necessarily agree with each other, are going to be part of this discussion.
Let me stick with you for a moment, Tebogo, but are we not getting ahead of ourselves? The president says already invitations have gone out to 750 organizations that will be present at the National Convention. Are we saying that in the absence of the foundations and parties like the DA and others who are not so keen, the issues and the complexity of issues that ail South Africa won't be reflected in the way that you've just outlined now? Is that what we are saying? Absolutely, and the trust deficit is very low, if there at all, because we don't know the list. I've been trying to find the list of those 700 and odd organizations that the president said, and I don't say the president is lying. It might very well be that there is a list of or invitation of 750, but I'm still to hear about anybody that has been, and as Chris said, if you look at the government website itself, the presidency, you don't see any such information disseminated. Where's GSCIS communicating that type of a list? So we can scrutinize that list and say, indeed, maybe there are other omissions. There are other people that ought to be considered. We don't see that. There's no transparency. Yoliswa, I felt that when you were raising the point of government acting as, quote unquote, the breadwinner, and mentioning that in the same breath as the need for the dialogue to be all-inclusive, I felt that there was a point you were seeking to make. Is it your reading that up to this point, that flexibility, you also used the word flexibility, has just not been there? So are you saying, for example, that given that the foundations have withdrawn in this way, and they represent various voices, it's not the be-all and end-all in terms of the voices that can be represented, but they are important voices in our society. Is it your view then that consideration should be given to listening more to what the concerns are, seeking to address them, even if that means we postpone what's coming up on Friday, the National Convention?
Certainly, for me, it means that we, from the government perspective, we need to listen more. We need to also ensure that that space that we have promised our partners to partner, that space is available for people from civil society, from communities, from academia, from churches, and etc. to partner. But I also think that what is important for us is that it's the substantive issues that come out of the dialogue, not just the logistics. So you can't convene a convention in order to discuss logistics. What has been the preparatory processes that have been put in place? We have communities, we have ward councils in South Africa, we have churches, we have academia, there's transformational institutions, institutional forums in academia. There's all kinds of places and capabilities for dialogue, but all probably what South Africans need is to be guided. How do they use these platforms to make input into the dialogue from a substantive issue, so that when you go to the convention, you go to the convention with some substantive input. You're not just going there to ask people, how do we get there? How do we do this? Already we have some platforms that we can utilize so that we arrange things in a thematic format. So I think there's some work that needs to be done before you even think of having a convention. I read somewhere saying government is saying the convention is necessary to discuss logistics. And I really don't think we should be putting so much effort in order just to deal with logistics, but we need to be looking at substantive matters. And it is our hope and appeal that all parties have the courage and wisdom to find humility in dealing with each other in order to ensure that this impasse around the convention and the national dialogue is dealt with for the good of South Africa. So we just have to put South Africa first before our interests and as the different parties. And I think that there is still space to engage. If, for instance, what I'm reading that the foundations are asking for October, my view is that, and I mean, I'm not in government as well, I don't know what government is thinking. The other thing is the transparency. We have not seen the agendas, we have not seen who are these people who have been invited. You know, the simplest thing to do is even to set up a website where you put these things up. Don't even depend on government website if you want to give identity to this dialogue itself. So let's just work together around those things and ensure that if it gets postponed, say to the October that is reported, there is substantive work that happens between now and October. And all those of us who want to make an input, like we have written from a reform perspective of the public sector, because we think that functionality of the public sector is a problem in South Africa. We need to talk about effectiveness of the public sector. We need to talk about reforms. Therefore, how do we make such inputs effectively into the process itself?
Christo, a parting shot to you. To the extent that you are critical of the lack of communication, awareness raising and conscientizing South Africans what this dialogue is about, the word of the president is that this is a dialogue that South Africans called for. Is it? Who called for this dialogue and to what end? Just if you were to, putting aside the differences that exist now in relation to the National Convention and the Preparatory Task Team, what is your best answer to who called for who wanted this dialogue to do what exactly?
Remember, the legacy foundations came together with a whole host of other role players that are worried about the current situation in South Africa, and we've established what we would call a preparatory task team. That was the first phase. The second phase had to then engage with government on budgets, etc., etc.